we will move right along to our next artist. So next we have Jamerry Kim, and she's presenting her project titled "To Translate is to Cross a Bridge, the Flushing Remonstrance," and in quotes, a protest. Jamerry is a multidisciplinary artist and an educator interested in themes of diaspora, language justice, and history. Okay, Jamerry, so yeah, thank you for joining us today, and the floor is yours.
Hey, thank you everyone for joining. I first want to start by giving a little thank you to Korean Art Forum and to the translators, Heng-Gil and Xiaoting and Naomi and David, and the artists. This is the first time working with the artist and also with KAF. So it's a really great opportunity. And Young, I think your meditative performance is a great segue into taking a moment of silence to acknowledge all the people who passed away and those who have been affected by COVID and the continued racism against people of color and the ongoing police brutality. So I'd like to take a 15 second pause. Okay, thank you. So this is the first slide. I want to start with a juxtaposed image of present day downtown Flushing, Main Street, right by the library. It's one of the busiest and densely populated streets in Flushing. And the other image on the top is the Flushing Quaker House that was built in 1693 and is still here and active to this day. Before I present my project, I want to give context and speak a bit about the history of Flushing and its relation to religious freedom that was sparked by the Flushing Remonstrance. It's a protest that was written in 1657. The Flushing Remonstrance was a letter of protest to the Dutch colonialist Peter Stuyvesant, who condemned the practice of the Quaker religion. When he publicly tortured a Quaker named Robert Hudson, a 23-year-old, Edward Hart, the town clerk of Flushing, along with the fellow citizens, wrote a petition to Stuyvesant, citing a Flushing town charter of 1645, which promised liberty of conscience. I want to read a part of that, the remonstrance, that I think is significant and relative to this day. And it goes like this: if any of these said persons come in love unto us, we cannot in conscience lay violent hands upon them, but give them free egress and regress unto our town, which basically states equal rights for all people who at that time were in Flushing. And I just want to note that this image of the Flushing Remonstrance, you can see the burnt kind of, the border. And this is the original document, which is now in Albany. And unfortunately, due to a fire, the original, this is what it looks like. So I just wanted to mention that. I was curious about this history of Flushing on many levels. First, as someone who came to America as a young person and had to find meaning in my own experience of American culture, language, and what does it mean to have roots? Because I think that history for me is non-linear, and I began to look for ideas that resonated with me, and I have adapted them into my own historical narrative. And I think one of the lineage is to Flushing's history of religious freedom and conscience. I wanted to start thinking about translation as a way of that communing and communicating. I'm not a translator nor a historian, but as an artist, I'm interested in the questions it poses on language, culture, assimilation, and the liminal spaces it creates for that contemplation. I started by translation of the Flushing Remonstrance, which is part of a bigger project that I'm working on. But right now, it's translated in English, in Chinese, in Korean, and in the process of other languages that represent present-day Flushing, such as Hindi, Tamil, Arabic, and more recently, languages such as Uyghur, Tibetan, and Nepali. This next slide is a clip of an interview I did with a fellow Flushingite and a photographer on her photo series, also inspired by the Flushing Remonstrance and the diversity of religious sites in Flushing. And I want to mention that Flushing has the most amount of religious sites in a neighborhood than any other neighborhood in America. Okay, and I'm going to play the clip.
So here are all. Can you see the
Yes.
Hindu temple?
Beautiful.
That was shot on my birthday. It was in January, and it was so cold, and nobody spoke English except for this gentleman over here, and I had to mime my way into getting them to remove their coats because they had big parkas on, because their garb was so beautiful that I wanted to, show off, the fabric, the what they were wearing. And I love that they made, this almost like a welcoming path for you to enter into the temple.
Mm-hmm.
So this North Presbyterian Church of Flushing is where I went for brownies. So each of these places were so different. Like the Promise.
Oh, I never know any of these places.
I know, and they're all close to each other. And like the Promise Church, it was like huge, and they had a Starbucks inside and babysitting.
What?
And yeah, no, I'm serious. They have these two big screens that would show. What was going on, and it was just like an incredible big experience, like a theater show, as you could tell by the bejeweled cross over here. But then you would have like something like the Quaker Meeting House, which was the biggest thing that they had in the Quaker Meeting House was a Bible that sat on a table that was like 200 years old. It was very, very different.
Mm-hmm.
Here's like the Church of St. Mel. And then also like the Unitarian Church, the most exciting thing they had was his multicolored shawl. Everything else was just wood and very, very plain.
Okay. You could catch the rest of the full interview on Arena, which is a channel that I have, and I'll send the link at the end of the talk. And I think part of the conversation of these religious sites, I wanted to talk specifically a little bit more about the Macedonia African Methodist Episcopal Church. It was founded in 1811. It's located on Union Street, and it's over 200 years old. And sadly, it was demolished last year. It was done silently without the knowledge of the public nor the church congregation. I just want to point out that the image on the top is the church, and then what is there now is this empty lot, and then you can see the kind of newly developed condominiums and all that stuff right on the side. So it's the church is a historic site where it served at one point the largest African American community in Flushing. Originally, the land was purchased by the Macedonia Society in 1811, which was comprised of free Blacks, Native Americans, and Quakers. Its rich history includes its connection to the Underground Railroad during slavery, and it's also a site of burial ground. So I think it's important to reflect about how history and its people can be quietly and completely eradicated. Now it's an empty lot ready for new construction. I'm also interested in the movement of information. In the image on the left, you can see that it's a signage map post that attempts to address the multiplicity of languages in Flushing, however, falls short to actually conveying the history and the map for the Freedom Mile. And right by the post, you can see a woman holding up a Chinese newspaper. And then in the image on the left, you can see a whole entire post bulletin board in Chinese where the neighborhood people go and get information. Before I move on to the current project, I want to show you a past project where I had postcards and had people, some strangers, friends, write their thoughts based on the prompt I am and I am not. It was a participatory project that resulted in my thinking about Flushing as a site for exploration of identity and engagement. And it also led me to record field sounds of Main Street, and I collaborated with a musician who then used the field recording and made a musical composition. And also using the postcards, I laid them in the busiest part of Main Street, which is right in front of the library as well. And I didn't have any specific agenda in terms of, you know, this is what the results should be, or this is what I want. I just had the intention of curiosity and openness and an excitement to see what would happen. Surprisingly, I had so many young people who were excited and curious and wanted to have conversation and ask questions. I was really surprised about that. And also I had adults who, you know, who could speak English and ask questions. They would want to interact. So it was a very positive experience. The big lesson there and the challenge for me doing a project like this is negotiating language. And I want to share a small clip of an interview that I did with Jefferson Mao. He's an urban planner, and he also grew up in Flushing. And it was a conversation about language and growing up in Flushing and what it was like back then compared to now. So this is just a little clip of his point of view on the diversity of language.
Backwards, when I was a kid, when I was 10 years old, Flushing that existed then was, I want to say, more multilinguistic than it is now, in the sense that you know, downtown Flushing right now is like a heavier presence of Chinese businesses and Chinese, with certain Korean businesses in certain parts of downtown. Back in the day, I think it was predominant.
Yep. Okay, so that's a very short clip, but you could catch the full interview also on Arena. And if you go to Discord, you can see our conversation there where we have the conversation, and then we also do posts of links and images of our conversation references. In this slide, I also want to say this project was supposed to have happened outdoors at the park. So there was a lot of the interaction with the community that was supposed to happen, and now it's moved to an online Google form in the form of a questionnaire. I wanted to do a questionnaire for a number of reasons, foremost being that 2020 is the census year, and having filled one out, I was dismayed at its limitations, and I wanted to create a different questionnaire that aimed to know more about Flushing's residents and the different living situation and its experiences. For example, there are many families who work in other cities like Boston and who live part-time in Flushing and have children who are going to school in Flushing and basically raising themselves. Or you have apartments where there are many roommates who are not related to you, and then that person might need assistance, government assistance, but then can't provide a utility bill with their name. So there are all these different situations, and I wanted to kind of you know, do a questionnaire that really kind of addresses those nuances in the different lives. And the other impetus was to acknowledge Flushing's 375th anniversary this year, and it was also a gesture to want to document the stories of the Flushing residents, new and old. So you can go to the links and see the questionnaire, and if you're interested, you can fill them out and distribute them. So if you're interested in that, I'll send the links again at the bottom of the chat. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you everybody, and thank you Jamerry for giving us that really great and in-depth overview of your work in Flushing and bringing in other voices too. That was really nice. So for time's sake, we will save the questions for the very end at the artist discussion, but thank you again.
Thank you.